Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa Newman, and today I want to talk about trauma loss and death, and how to actually have conversations with people in relation to death and dying and grieving. So this comes on the back of the Bondi disaster shootings that took place. And in that moment when I saw that story unfold, one thing that occurs with people who are grieving, especially very fresh in grief and loss, is death becomes very prominent around us. You start to notice a lot of death taking place around us, and I guess it's because of where we are in that moment. But for me, when I saw the story of Bondi, what I connected into was the actual experience of the trauma loss. I immediately knew, listening to that story, exactly what the people were now catapulted into. The absolute devastation and confusion, the inability to just fathom what's actually taken place. It's also something that you've been thrusted into a death that I guess shouldn't have taken place. But when I say shouldn't have taken place, we also must remember, for those that think this way, that it is my belief, I guess, that we are destined at some point to exit this world, however that appears. That may be hard, I guess, for some people to accept. So devastatingly so that people have lost their lives. Even in America, there was another lockdown and shooting. So death is all around us. And so I remembered, by witnessing this story, exactly through trauma loss, what these people are now going through. And it's utterly devastating, and my heart does go out to them because I know the journey that is now ahead of them. But I want to talk to trauma loss and death because there's some really important things for us to understand. Perhaps the family members and friends who have someone that has been now touched by this death, this loss of a family member or a friend. And it touches us even when it's not immediately close to us as well. So we're all impacted in some way because we're all reminded that death is imminent. And so I guess today's video, I want to talk on a few different things, but I really particularly want to talk, as was instigated with a video that I came across on the weekend on social media, quite randomly, didn't know who this person was, popped up in my feed, had a bit of a look, and his story was true in the sense, as he shared his story about his grief and loss, how many family and friends, the ones that we feel would be the most supportive for us in our most devastating times in our life, are often the quickest to run. Sadly, that is very true. It's not in all cases, because I know there's been people that have grieved and had tons of support with family and friends. But for the ones that don't actually get to experience that support and feel supported through death, through grief, through loss, it actually, coupled with trauma loss, it actually increases that experience, the devastation. It magnitudes it on such a level. And the immensity of stress that a person endures is quite phenomenal in the sense that they're actually in survival mode. And so my heart goes out to all people who are experiencing grief, losing someone in their life. Not that we lose anyone, to be honest, but when someone leaves the world and is no longer with us physically, to people that might be facing imminent death through a terminal illness. I have clients moving through this now. And it always seems to be this time of the year at Christmas that is always the hardest to get through for many, and especially so when it's your first Christmas without your loved one. And so this video this man put up, he expressed how he just could not fathom the people closest to him, how they were the quickest to run, and how majority of those people, and this is a person like many others, myself included, then it's unfathomable that people would do that to someone that is a family member or a very dear close friend. It's absolutely unfathomable. And he was expressing this. He was expressing his hurt. He was expressing how he was finding it challenging to forgive these people. And he's working on that, which is beautiful because we do, as I did. I had to learn to forgive these people for they were not able to show up purely based on, I guess, where they were emotionally, mentally, and so forth. But I do feel it actually is a true indicator of the character of the person as well. So I think that actually falls on them more than it does on us, the bereaved. But us as the bereaved that experience that in the turmoil of emotions that we go through, from an ego perspective, we can look into that when we're grieving and often blame ourselves, which becomes extremely hurtful, but it becomes, what's the word? What am I trying to say? It actually really impacts a person's ability to grieve. So I want to kind of tap into all of this trauma loss and why is it that people run? What are people afraid of? And the one thing that I feel people are afraid of that causes people to run is the fear of death. It's the fear of dying. No one, as I know in my work, no one feels overly safe. Well, I can't say no one, right? Because there are people like me that do feel safe to communicate and feel and know that death is normal, but majority of people are afraid to talk about death. They won't plan for it. And when it comes, it's a devastating experience for all family members involved. They won't communicate it. They won't normalize it. And so there's this elephant in the room always. And so through grief and loss, whether it's trauma loss or grief that is less, I can't say less because everyone's grief is all relevant, but there are levels to grief. Absolutely, there's levels to grief. And so when people aren't able to talk about death, that then can impact how, if you are such a person, and there's nothing wrong with not feeling safe to talk about death. It's just, it hasn't been something that we have, Westerners particularly culturally, accepted as normal, because we try to prevent it. We try to prolong life. We want to prolong living longer. We're trying to prevent the inevitable. And it's not inevitable, but it impacts when we are able to communicate around death. It can impact our ability to be able to support the bereaved. And this is what's really important, because there are many people experiencing death, loss of family members, some sudden, some expected, and some totally unexpected through trauma loss. So why do people run? Because they're so freaking scared to talk about death. And people just don't know what to say to someone who is grieving. And that's okay if you don't know what to say. It actually is. But it shouldn't give you the reason to run and not support someone. And if you are running, you might need to question why that is. The other part of that people might run is through shame. For example, suicide death. There's so much shame and stigma around that, and people have many strong beliefs, whether they're religious beliefs or what have you, and they deem suicide death as something wrong. But who are we to judge someone else's actions? We don't know what it was like for them to be in their shoes. And so people will say the darndest things, the most hurtful things to a bereaved person out of their inability, I guess, to hold compassion and understanding and let go of their beliefs for a moment and just unconditionally, lovingly support this person in need of their most tragic, devastating experience that they find themselves in. This is so important, that we somehow find a way to step away from our judgments, from our beliefs, because we don't need to impose our beliefs. Your beliefs, like mine, are ours to own personally. They're not for projection. And so that experience for a bereaved person is detrimental to their grieving process, because for me, it silenced my grief. I did not feel safe to be able to communicate it because I was in fear of judgment. And here I was, just a person trying to freaking navigate what that experience was, and also navigate something I didn't honestly plan for, that perhaps there would be a death of my own children, because we don't believe that to ever to be true, right? That's going to happen to us. And this is the thing about death. We can't guarantee tomorrow. We've got to realize this and start talking about it and make it okay. And so that is detrimental. Our judgments, our criticisms, our whatever we deem wrong, to impose and put that on someone who is grieving is not okay. And so aside from all that, it really is important for us all to understand this message, of how, in one way, or for one, how do we support the bereaved? Because you might be a person that feels uncomfortable to talk about death. You might fear death for whatever reason. It's actually important for you to understand why you fear it. And so trauma loss is going to be the hardest path these people are now going to walk. For many, many different reasons that could go on forever today. But it is really important that perhaps if you are that person that doesn't want to talk about death or dying or even face it, be with it, to try and understand why that is. But what really is important is knowing how to support the bereaved so you don't run from discomfort, from your discomfort. So a few things to help. Just got to clear something off my screen. Always does that. So a few things to help you to support someone who is bereaved is it's okay to not know what to say to soothe their pain. But you can be honest and say to them, I honestly don't know what to say. Be honest and upfront and open and say, I don't know how to support you, but I'm willing to just be here with you. And in that willingness, try not to offer advice and solutions. And I understand that's natural, right? We want to do something to ease their pain. But advice and solutions is not what they need. They actually would benefit from absolute deep listening. That's where our lips are zip tight. Deep listening. An easy way to remember how to do deep listening is when the person is communicating to you and you feel that urge to step in and say something. Remind yourself in that moment, this is not my story, this is their story. Because then that just kind of puts everything into perspective and you kind of then are able to take a back seat. And most often they will guide you if they're able to. One other important thing I think of not to say is to say to a bereaved person, tell me what you want me to do. What can I do for you? Because what that does is it actually passes over the responsibility to the bereaved person. And you've got to actually remember, for the bereaved, they have no mental capacity to tell you what to do because they don't even know what they need. They are completely numb. They are in survival mode, trying to work out what the frigs just happened. So to put the onus onto them and say, tell me what you need, you're putting the responsibility onto them that they can't actually handle for obvious reasons. So what can you do? You might rock up and knock on their door to to pay them a visit, drop off maybe some flowers to be with them, and they might refuse your help in that moment. They might just say, I can't do this today. I can't see anyone today. But that's not your ticket to never come back and help. That's not telling you never come back. Because most often what happens is that person, if that's what you experience from the bereaved, you then become uncomfortable thinking, oh, I shouldn't go visit. Oh, you get into that questioning of, I shouldn't be there. But yes, you should. And you can show up by bringing them healthy, nutritious meals. You can show up and just take ownership, responsibility, or an action and do something around the home. The kitchen might be an absolute mess because they haven't been able to, I guess, clean up. There's many things around the home, in the home, food that can be brought to them, because one thing is we don't do is eat. We are so stressed that we don't even have a desire for food. And so most often what we'll do is we'll just eat rubbish and drink more. So having healthy meals handy that they can stick in the microwave is absolutely amazing. And stock the freezer and make sure it stays stocked. There are so many things that you can do, that you do every single day for yourself around your home, that will support them. No questions asked, just dive in and just do it. And remember that that's not, that refusal of the help comes from a place of exhaustion, not knowing what they actually need. That's not a cue for you to never come back and support. And when they are communicating with you, try not to fix, to find a solution to what it is that they might be experiencing. Try not to fix, just be that deep listener. And one other thing that's really important to understand is there's a little window between the death and the funeral. It's roughly about 2 weeks. Mine was about 2.5 weeks. It was the most horrendous time of having to wait until the funeral. In that time, normally there's a huge outpouring from family and friends and community with love and support for the bereaved. And in that time, they're not even in the reality of really understanding what's actually still taken place. And so everyone rocks up within, everyone at once, within that 2 weeks, which is amazing. But what happens is when the funeral happens, that's when the actual reality is really beginning to set in. This is like, oh shit, this has actually happened, this is real. And this is when everyone returns to their lives and then forgets to come back and visit the bereaved. And then the bereaved person all of a sudden had a huge amount of outpouring of love, which is beautiful, to now 1 or 2 people that keep checking in. And yet this is actually when really the beginning of the reality is beginning to set in, the starkness of what has actually taken place. And this is when the journey for 6 months, 12 months, even 2 years, especially in that first year, it's really important to maintain your love and support beyond and after the funeral. And then what you will find in that time frame, within that first year, is your bereaved loved one will actually need to express their story 1,000 times over, repeating and going over, especially trauma loss, going over and over the story. And when you visit, you will hear that story 1,000 times. And it's really important that you avoid telling them that they should be over it by now. That is just not the correct response to give somebody, because what's actually taking place is for a person who is grieving and healing, for them to process what has actually happened, especially trauma loss, is they need to rehash that story. And in that rehashing, that is the process that they take to heal. That is the process of healing through grief and loss, trauma loss. Rehashing that story is a normal. And so being able to show up with compassion, no matter what, is so important. To be okay to hear that story 1,000 times and they're still crying just as much as they did the first day. It's all releasing that trauma, that pain, that sorrow, the emotions through the tears, through the constant repeating of the story. If they have that opportunity to share their story, something I didn't get to do, I get to do it now in a really healthy way. To share my wisdom learnings. It was all for a reason. And so their process of healing, it will take a long time. And their body is in an immense amount of stress, the most amount of stress anyone will experience in their lifetime. So please don't shut down that process. Allow them to tell their story how many times they need to, and sit with them in deep listening with absolute compassion. So I guess this is a reminder of the importance for us to be able to talk about death. Because this is the other bit that I want to talk about. The elephant in the room. We all somehow think it's never going to happen to us, or it's in the distant, way distant future. I've got years before I even need to worry about that. But that's not true. Because like me, you could lose a child. I hope not. Or you could find yourself in a public situation where something traumatic unfolds, just like it did in Bondi. Even in Australia, we are not immune to such atrocities, shootings. We're a pretty good country in comparison. How lucky are we? How fortunate are we? But we cannot assume or believe that death may not come tomorrow, because it just very well may be your experience tomorrow. I hope to God not. Death is an inevitable part of life. We are born, we have a period of time on this earth, however long or short, and we die. And that might sound a little harsh, but I kind of feel like we need to actually come on board with this and stop pretending that we can prolong life or that it's somewhere in the future. We need to get real with death. And a great book for doing that, which I'm actually reading at the moment, is the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. If you're afraid of death, I highly recommend, I'm only 3/4 through, but I highly recommend you read this book because it will eliminate your fears. Puts a lot into perspective as well, especially if you're on the spiritual path. But what it does when we're okay with death is it allows us to live our life completely and fully in the present moment. What will you choose? Because when we're afraid of death and dying, it's because something in our life in this now moment is not allowing us to be free. We regret dying. We can regret dying if we're faced with it through terminal illness or however, or if we're just facing mortality for whatever reason, however that has come into your world. When we fear death, there are numerous things going on. We can have regret for not fixing relationships, repairing relationships. Because when we are facing mortality, we're in this moment where we realize that those grievances weren't actually worth it, holding on to them. And now it's almost too late to even reverse any relationship breakdowns. That's one reason we fear death. We fear that we haven't lived a good life. How are you choosing to live your life day to day? We need to get real as to understanding what it is that we're actually fearing about death. Do we feel like we haven't accomplished all that we wish to accomplish? Relationships are a big one. I cannot believe what I see in my work with people that are facing mortality and how the family members and the friends that they once had, not one single soul that they ever had met or was close to is now with them. And so people are facing death on their own. That's another huge reason people fear death, dying alone. It comes down to being able to let go of our grievances We've got to stop looking outside of ourselves in blame, that this person did this and you cannot forgive them. My family members did lots. In the beginning, I deemed did to me. But I've resolved the different issues, especially with my parents, who my father was probably my greatest teacher. And I'm at peace with that. And we're on talking terms. But there are other people in my life, as much as I have forgiven and have no qualms, I feel, and I say this with love in case I happen to come across this video, haven't been able to find within them what it is that they need to, so that they can forgive whatever they need to find forgiveness for. Because in reality, nothing is ever done to us. Oh my God, I learned that the hard way. Everything is done for us. And relationships are crucial as human beings. So why are we dismissing all these people in our lives out of hatred and judgment and unforgiveness? Because in truth, when we reach death, none of it frickin' matters. What matters is that you wished, you regret, you didn't let go and forgive. There's so many parts to this fear of dying, but relationships is huge. I feel, and you need to discern your truth, but what I have learned is everything is done for us, even death, even loss. The loss of my son was for me. And when we stop looking outside of ourselves and look within to see what it is that we're being shown, where we are not okay in everyday life is where we are not free. If you are not okay with death, please examine why that is. Thinking about it doesn't mean it's going to make it happen. If you are not okay with your relationships, look within and try to understand why that is. How can you change it? Some people you might not be able to find resolution with, but that's okay. If you tried, and if you have learnt and grown from it, then that's all you need to do. That's all any of us need to do. So that one thing that frightens us, death, is because of all these little things. What is everyone saying after this tragedy in Bondi? We need love, we need compassion, we need relationships, we need to come together. We need relationships. Everyone keeps saying it, but no one's doing it within themselves, within their own little worlds. It starts within us to find the peace that we desire. I have found so much peace from the amount of pain that I went through over my lifetime. I'm not just making this stuff up and saying anything that I have not done for myself. There is freedom through compassion, through forgiveness, and by loving yourself and loving everyone, both shadow and light. We are all both. And so This trauma loss has a big message because all of us are experiencing trauma of some sort, some trauma loss, whether it's a physical death. These are our opportunities to come together, but to come forward for you first and foremost, because everything starts with us. And we'll never be free unless we change what it is that we're not okay with. So trauma loss. Don't run from grief and death. If you don't know what to say, be honest and open and say exactly as it is with the bereaved, that what it is that you don't know, and let them know that you are there for them and be there for them. This acknowledgement when someone is grieving is absolute paramount. Everyone needs to be acknowledged in their grief for exactly as it is for them. Language is important. Stop and think before you speak and remove your biases, your beliefs, and just come forward through compassion and unconditional love. Listen, deeply listen. We zip our lips and we remember, this is not my story. This is their story. Allow them to have the platform. And be prepared to hear their story 1,000 times, 2,000 times, because that is the process they must walk and move through to heal, to find their answers, to let go and release, and gradually rediscover their new normal. And be okay in the face of death. Because at some point, hopefully later rather than sooner, you too will be touched by death. This is normal. I have walked this path. And yes, after 8 years, I have come out the other side because I chose to. Death, grief, also requires choice to keep on living. We must, at some point, find a way to keep on living. And it will happen in your time. So for those who are bereaved, I know the shoes you are standing in. I know the pain. That you have been catapulted into. It's not an easy path. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But it is a path and a rite of passage. And you will not be able to make sense or even see hope or see a future at this point in time. But if there's one thing I do know, that in time, with love and support all around you, you will get through this. I know it because you can. And it doesn't mean your loved one, when you re-enter life, when you choose when the right time is for that to re-enter life as your new normal, you will be able to continue the journey, and your loved one will want that for you. Namaste. Thank you for listening.